clear it. What do you do to clear it?
Push both of these. Right.
Yeah.
Push both of those at the same time. It clears it, and then you add.
And then you can add temperature. Okay, good. Okay. I didn't want it beeping all over the place. Didn't know how to stop.
Susan.
So what do you think? He wants more money.
No, they're on Manchester.
I absolutely love it. He's just done a fabulous job.
Keep the county commissions in the news.
Oh, yes, I know. We'll take the pressure off you. And thank you for your responsiveness.
Does it look like it? Still make the call.
Oh, yeah.
50 emails just for it. Yeah, but now they're because they're all kinds of these guys. Got like 20 minutes. They're pushing back. I don't think any of it's
I don't think it's going to go through.
I know.
Natural area.
You don't want to lose that. You know, the piggy recreation, the hikers and mountain hikers work together. It's the same thing as Black Rock work and Another. No problem.
Looks like we're all here. DDA meeting is now underway. May we have the roll call?
Sure. So Wednesday, December 1st, 2010, Ann Arbor DDA meeting. Gary Boren.
Here.
Newton Clark.
Here.
Jeff Collins.
Here.
Bob Dunkel.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heathcock.
Here.
Joe Monstein.
Here.
John Loa.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split.
Here.
We have a forum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is audience participation. We don't have anyone who has signed up previously, but if there's anyone who would like to address us, you may do so now for 4 minutes. Is there anyone? Okay, we do not have anyone today. So we'll begin with our reports from our city boards and commissions. Ray Detter from the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
Every year, the Citizens Advisory Council has a holiday party meeting for food and drink and discussion of our goals for the downtown the coming year. Last night, about 25 members, former members, and we were graced also by the presence of Sandy Smith. Most of us live in the First Ward, so that it was very nice of her to come so we could talk about some of the issues that affect the First Ward, which includes most of the downtown. And the object of the meeting is to discuss where we want to go in the year 2011. And it was pretty wide-ranging last night. There were a lot of views. As you know, the Citizens Advisory Council has been a major supporter of the 1992, as well as the new downtown plan. And we reaffirm those commitments to those downtown plans as they are. And we also participated in the newly adopted A2D2 zoning and work on the emerging A2D2 design downtown guidelines. We support increased downtown density. And we supported that for quite a period of time. We supported almost every project that increases density in the downtown if it's residential. Last night we reaffirmed our commitment to more residents, more families, more grocery stores, and more amenities in the downtown, and underground parking and mixed-use development of the library lot in cooperation with the Downtown District Library. The whole emphasis last night is on more, which is going to make it more desirable for people to live downtown. That is in the DDA area. And last night, our commitment to downtown and near downtown green space also emerged. It was a significant part of our discussion. We reaffirmed our commitment to the Allen Creek Greenway, a commitment we have had ever since our members helped to create the downtown plan of 1988, which included that commitment to the downtown Allen Creek Greenway, also with emphasis upon downtown parks. And since 1991, of course, and one of our members was actually participating in that. When the Lukenbach-Ziegelman plan was put forward, we strongly supported the underground parking there in the plaza on top, along with mixed-use development, and we're still there. We reaffirm and support that position, and will in the year 2011. In near downtown areas, we're delighted with the nearby newly designed West Park, and if you haven't seen it, take a look. Some people would like to change its name to Central Park West, in order to more closely relate it to of the downtown. It's only a short walk from the area where many people want green space, and it's there. We want it to be used even more. And of course, we're very supportive of that marvelous park, which you may not have taken a good look at, which is just to the east of the new North Quad. It's a beautiful park, which is available for downtown residents and near downtown neighbors as well as students, with benches and the whole works. And of course, we also support the Arbor Pond and the mill race and the preservation there, because again, that's only a short way from the downtown. We want to emphasize the fact that we have a lot of parks which are very close to the downtown area, and we want those to be of use to people who move into the downtown area. You know, from my house, and I said that last night, from my house I can have a fishing pole in the pond in 5 minutes, just getting on my bike. And people asked me last night whether I ever caught anything, and the answer was no. But there are a lot of people who sit around fishing in that area. But that's only 5 minutes away from the downtown, and that's a major amenity that we want to emphasize in the year 2011, and bring people more in contact with that, and also bring more people downtown. We also supported last night improved and alternative transportation, and an emphasis upon more in that area as well. One of our downtown members has been in Dubai for the last 2 years, and she and her husband were there last night as well. And they emphasized the fact that they were delighted by the fact that when they came back to Ann Arbor again, there were so many bikes, just in 2 years. And that was a major thing that was discussed last night. We want more of that alternative transportation. Certainly the DDA and the mayor have been a part of that. And finally, we also discussed the need for the panhandling task force, which we strongly support, the direction that they're going under the leadership of Chairman Sabre Briere. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. It was nice to have that summary from your holiday gathering. It sounds like pretty much the whole philosophy of the DDA. So it's very nice to know that we're all in sync with creating downtown density and making downtown the heart of our city. Thank you. Next, we have status of task force efforts. So first, we'll do the library lot RFP, and I think we actually have some news.
We actually had a meeting after several months hiatus. The committee met with the consultant that was hired on November 23rd, Tuesday, and there were 3 members of the committee present, as well as the city administrator and the Roxbury group presented their report, and everybody has a copy of the executive summary. I'll just sort of run through it. They did interviews with many stakeholders in town. I think primarily those folks who would be have some knowledge, interest in what a conference center would mean to downtown. And from those interviews, they came to the conclusion that there was indeed a need for a downtown conference center. They also were interviewed at the library and had conversations with Josie Parker about synergies that may exist between the conference center and the library. They then interviewed the proponents, the 2 proponents that remain, and they gave them questions, got responses, and from those interviews and responses to questions, they recommend that the committee recommend the value group as the favored proponent. The reasons for this, they felt that a conference center had greater community benefit than a hotel standing alone, although they feel that there may be a need for additional downtown hotel space. They thought that the conference center was essentially a game changer, which brought much benefit to downtown. The AqueQuest group, although they have much experience in building hotels, conference centers, etc., was not quite as definitive in what they were proposing as Valiant was. So they thought that Valiant's proposal was much clearer and was much more capable of moving forward. The one, and on page 4, you'll see the recommendation that they are proposing that or recommending that the committee give a conditional recommendation of the Valiant Group after a letter of intent is signed. And the letter of intent would further define what the Valiant Group's proposal actually is going to look like. It would give the city and the DDA further time to negotiate some of those things. We were asked before we left the meeting whether there were any objections to going forward with this line, and the 3 committee members present didn't have any objections. The city is going to begin to do some due diligence on their part with the city attorney's office, staff, etc. I'm not sure that the city has ever gone forward with a letter of intent before, so they wanted to examine what that would mean from the city's perspective, and that's where we've left it. I don't know when the committee is going to get together again. We talked about doing it before the holiday. It may be after January, but after the city does its due diligence, the committee will get together again and decide how we'd like to move forward.
I
Questions?
just have one comment. The most exciting line in this whole recommendation here is Valiant was able to strengthen the development's potential for revenue generation, eliminating the need for any publicly guaranteed debt, which was in their first, both of them had
They have,
publicly
yes,
guaranteed debt. It's gone.
It is not in the executive summary. That's a good point. They have revised their original proposal, and they may continue to revise proposal going forward if that's the direction that things go. But yes, they have removed the request for the city to hold a bond, and I think that may be a key.
Thank you.
Given our other conversations with mutually beneficial regarding development, do you think it might be relevant to perhaps include this site and the potential for conference center drafting of a letter of intent, or however that may play out? I agree with Board Member Gunn that it's good that the bond's gone, but it also basically points out that, commercial office space or other revenue generations, that's kind of what we're going to be looking at in theory as we're looking about viability of certain things. I mean, I can tell you off the top of my head, rents are about half what they would need to be market to justify new construction of office space, given construction costs. So things like that down the road may be a value for our work with our committee structure and what we're doing. It doesn't make a lot of sense to eliminate the library lot or potential for this from the discussions of the other lots.
I think at this point, this is standing by itself.
Okay.
And again, not knowing how things are going to proceed, what would a letter of intent look like? What would we be negotiating in that letter of intent? How much input would we have in that? It's all conjecture at this point, as far as I'm aware.
Just, I guess then if the idea is holistically to look at development downtown moving forward, it doesn't make a ton of sense to leave this one completely off the table, at least from a discussion standpoint.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
All right.
John,
Good.
again, what do you think the timetable is?
Again, I am not. When we left, we were not certain whether we were going to get together again before the holidays or after January 1st, and so may know more in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but help me. What exactly is the committee's charge going forward now that you have the recommendation?
I think that if the city comes back and thinks that a letter of intent is something that they are willing to do, then the committee, and I'm not sure that that is totally clear, but I think the committee would then try to go forward with the city's approval. And again, it's a city RFP, but with the city's approval, would have the consultant start to negotiate the terms of the letter of intent.
So the authorization really needs to come from the city?
Yes, yeah, I would say so. And again, we were asked, the committee was asked if we had any objections. Again, there were only 3 of us there. Nobody does. And again, I'm not exactly sure what the protocol is going to be going forward, but the city may be making that decision. Again, I'm not sure.
And procedurally, this is going to go to our partnerships committee for
from the
discussion.
DDAs and again, don't know exactly when that's going to be, when we're going to be asked to be taking a look at that.
Okay. Also, what we have is the executive summary. There is a much more detailed report from the consultant. That is it up on our website now?
It is not yet, but will be.
Okay. So it will be going up on our website if anyone wants to look at it. And before that happens, if any of our members, we have copies. If anybody else wants to look at it in more detail, it does. For instance, it compares kind of what has changed from when these proposals were originally made, and throughout the process there were some changes made, and all that's very interesting to look at if you want to get further detail.
Yeah, and one of the other things I know that was mentioned, a further feasibility study may be part of a letter of intent as well. That may be one more thing that needs to be addressed because again, it wasn't addressed in the consultant's report.
Okay. Thank you, John. Finally, after all this time, we have something. Next, our committee to discuss a mutually beneficial agreement with the city, and we have materials on pages 1 through 6 of our packet. And Roger.
Okay. This will be a little longer than our typical mutually beneficial report because we are really at a point now where we are coming both to City Council and the Board with a proposal. And I should emphasize, this is not an agreement. This is a proposal for both the City Council and the DDA Board to consider and give feedback on it. I think the committee felt that it was, certainly members of the committee felt that we needed to have at least something concrete to react to. So we have, although it still has a lot of detail that needs to be hammered out, this at least I think is a point where we can, as a board, sit down and discuss the concepts and give direction on how to proceed. So this is far from a completed agreement. It is essentially the proposal part. It came up that we were sort of on a deadline to get the final part of it, the parking part, ready for a council work session that took place on the 15th of November. And as usual, things kind of get done at the end when you have a deadline. So we have something that I think is probably far from perfect from both sides, but at least something that both bodies can now discuss. These have been difficult discussions. They've been very cordial, and we've put a lot of work in. But there are really two sorts of viewpoints on the DDA's relationship with the city. And one, I think, is a contractual viewpoint that we have a contract to manage the parking system. It still has approximately 4 years to run. And unless there is an arm's length equal give and take on a renegotiation where there are equal benefits for both sides, the contract should remain. On the other viewpoint, the DDA is indeed a political body. We are all political appointees, and we work within a larger political unit, the city. And although we manage assets, those assets are owned by the city, the parking structures, the land they sit on, the surface parking lots, and the on-street parking. And not only do they belong to the city, but in a larger sense to the citizens of the city, and the citizens certainly have some rights to how the proceeds of that system are spent. So there are two very different viewpoints, and I think viewpoints that are pretty hard to reconcile. We've tried to come up with something that, if perhaps not completely equal, at least offers some benefit to the DDA as well as financial benefits to the city. And I will go through the parking part of that. We've discussed the development part. I think from a strictly legal standpoint, there was a contractual standpoint, there was an interest in whether the DDA with its parking money would simply buy the surface parking lots from the city. They are public property, and as such, I think the citizens are going to want some say in what actually ends up on those properties. Something that a strict sale would probably not permit. So we've come up with a proposal on the development part that the DDA would be taking over the RFP process with some both rigorous public input as well as professional input from real estate experts, because we both need to know what the citizens want to see on those sites, and we also need to propose something that is feasible in the real economic world, that someone can actually build. So that's, I think, the basis of the development part. On the parking proposal, if you'll turn to page 1, we outline what the proposed amendments would be. First would be that we would create a parking district around downtown that the DDA would manage. Amber Miller did an excellent job in coming up with a proposal on this that was very scientific in its approach rather than emotional in this approach. And although it doesn't show up very well in black and white, she has a multi-page PowerPoint sent out to the board online. Essentially, she looked at how far out we currently manage parking spaces outside the DDA area, which is about, at this farthest point, about 3,300 feet outside the boundaries. Drew a circle around the DDA about that dimension. Then identified all the commercial, governmental, recreational, medical, and educational facilities within that circle, and where it would be appropriate to be managing parking. Also identified all the residential permit streets where there already is a parking plan in place, and then eliminated parts of the circle that weren't near any of the users of parking. So essentially, most of the western part of the circle was eliminated, as well as some of the southeast side. So what remains is areas that are near the university or other medical or commercial areas, some residential permit areas that would certainly remain residential permit areas, and then some streets that are clearly residential in nature that we would designate as potential residential permit areas. In other words, places where we would not put parking meters, and other areas where it would be appropriate for us to manage it and manage the parking through parking meters. The details of that have to be worked out, but the approach I have to commend Amber, I thought was a very logical, well thought out approach to what made sense. Again, the devil will be in the details, but I think the philosophy is pretty straightforward. We don't want to be putting parking meters in front of single-family residences. At the same time, there is a lot of commuter parking in and near the downtown that needs to be managed better than it currently is. So that's the first proposal. The second proposal would, as we are going to concerns parking rates, as we're going to parking demand management, we are going from a simple system we have now where the parking meters are one rate, the parking structures are one rate, and the surface parking lots are one rate, to a multitude of different rates based on what the demand for those actual spaces is. So the spaces that are in the highest demand have the highest rates. The spaces that have little demand have very low rates. So currently, if we want a rate change, we propose that in a memo to City Council, and if City Council does not act, that goes into effect. Under this amendment, we would be able to alter rates as we saw fit to best manage the parking system within and near the DDA area. And again, this would mean rates would go up in some cases and go down in other cases. Rates could be different within individual parking structures. For instance, the roof would be potentially less expensive than the first floor. Certainly there are areas where the parking meters could be very inexpensive and for very long-term periods because they're a walk from where anybody would want to be going, whereas parking spaces that are in very high demand would probably be for shorter periods of time and higher rates. So this gives the DDA the flexibility to put that system in place without having to go through a political process to do it. Third, the city would provide, the city was reluctant to turn over the parking enforcement to the DDA. We have proposed that the DDA be allowed to direct a segment of a portion of the parking enforcement on specific geographic and time areas. So if we see an area that we think we're getting low compliance in, or a time period that we're getting low compliance in, we can designate that city enforcement be a certain number of hours enforcement be focused in those areas. This will, again, is a critical part for our transportation or parking demand management to be able to make sure that we're trying to move toward compliance, not just the punishment of a parking ticket. And the last and undoubtedly the most controversial part is the financial part. Currently, under the old contract, the DDA paid the city $1 million a year for a 10-year period, plus it also approximately $800,000 a year to its street maintenance fund, as well as added on some additional money that came from the old YMCA lot and also the 415 West Washington lot. As I think everyone knows, the city took $2 million a year for the first 5 years of the contract, or the entire $10 million, and that's why we're sitting here discussing this. So in the last fiscal year, the total amount the DDA paid the city from all 4 of those was a little under $3 million. We're proposing instead of a fixed amount, a percentage of the gross parking revenues for 2 reasons. First, there's concern that as we move more toward compliance and less toward parking tickets as a means of revenue generation, that the city may lose some parking ticket revenue. If they do, it is certainly logical to assume the DDA would see some additional parking revenue from those meters where people are no longer getting tickets. The city then gets a portion of that. So although the city may could potentially, although certainly not for sure, lose a little bit of parking ticket revenue, they could pick up some parking revenue from the regular use of the meters. And second, since the city has come back when we had a fixed amount and is now looking for more money, by making them a partner in the system where they get a chunk of the money that comes out, and as the system expands, they get some of that expansion. It is my hope that there will be less inclination to come back and continue to discuss this contract, in that there are some accelerators built into the system as the system grows. The city benefits and the DDA benefits. And we are proposing the contract be a 10-year contract and start this coming July 1st when the fiscal year starts, July 1st, 2011. Again, this is getting something out on the table for us to react to. We can certainly start a discussion now. We thought we would also pick that up in partnerships and then have a probably more rigorous discussion at the next board meeting, which is going to be an extended meeting looking at both the 10-year plan and also this agreement. So,
Does anybody have any questions of Roger? Yeah.
So what happens to the development part? Is that part and parcel? I know we've gone over it before,
Yeah.
and I understand.
The intention always had been is that there would be two parts that would be enacted at the same time. One would be amendments to the parking contract, and another one would be a resolution from City Council dealing with the development part. And these would be enacted simultaneously.
But the development part would not be part of the parking contract?
It would not be part of the contract. It would be a separate resolution from City Council.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, I've been sort of known as the person who takes the legalistic view as opposed to the political view. Although it's not completely correct. I mean, I am concerned that we gave $2 million. Mutually Beneficial was set up originally to flesh out the details of the quid pro quo that DDA was supposed to get in exchange for the $2 million that we already, I don't know if we've actually written the check, but we've already promised and we will write the check. And now that seems to have gone under the bridge. It's like that $2 million is ancient history. For some reason we're talking about the next 4 or 5 or even 10 years of the parking contract as opposed to what happened to that $2 million. I believe in the legalistic view from the standpoint that we need to be able to rely on promises, both from the city, and the city needs to be able to rely on promises from us. And we had promises in the form of a contract, and I think that we should certainly stick to that. Having said that, we're a political entity that has a political mission, which is, I believe, all about downtown. And I think that's getting forgotten in the discussions. It's getting forgotten all along. We need to really, I'm willing to consider political quid pro quos if they are mission-based, if they benefit our downtown. And my concern is that if I am a downtown merchant, and certainly even as a downtown resident, but more as a merchant, and I see parking rates go up, which appreciably affect my bottom line in terms of how many customers are willing to shop here as opposed to Arborland. And when I see compliance revenues either going up or somehow being guaranteed, meaning that's an additional hassle for people coming downtown because they're afraid of getting tickets, then I got to wonder, why is that profit from this system going into the general fund without any guarantees of downtown benefit? I've got to ask, what, as a merchant, what is in it for me? Now, you can say that there are market, or that there's a market rate for pricing and so on. We essentially, frankly, have a monopoly in the parking system. And it's one thing to say that we can use pricing for demand management purposes, something that I support. It's another thing to say that those profits should then be maximized and put into the general fund. This is essentially a tax on downtown merchants. And I think they need something concrete that they can point to that says, that shows them that this money is coming back to them one way or the other. So if we can come up with a political solution that guarantees a mission-based benefit for downtown merchants, downtown residents, the DDA, that's great. I don't think we've seen anything close to that yet.
Well, I really would like to disagree with that, because I think City Council has worked long, hard hours, along with the Planning Commission and us, to create a new downtown plan, to do the A2D2 zoning. And it wasn't that long ago that we didn't used to get any meter revenue. I remember, and I'm the longest serving member here, so there's some historical perspective, trying to negotiate with Mayor Sheldon and not getting anywhere in terms of parking meter revenue. And when Mayor Heftia came in, we were able to negotiate a deal where we would collect the meter revenue and we've put it into our parking fund. Then the city came to us to ask for help, and we agreed to help them, and I don't think that's unreasonable because the downtown is more than merchants and residents. It's all of us in the city. I'm downtown all the time. I don't live downtown. I don't have a business downtown, but I sure do use the downtown, and I appreciate the fact that we have well-run, good parking. We didn't used to. And I give credit to the city for cooperating with us to help us succeed in managing their assets of both the structures lots and the on-street meters, which we didn't have so long ago. So I don't think it's really fair to say that the city council has not created a mission for downtown. I think they really have cooperated with us.
I actually agree with you that the mission, they have created a mission for the downtown by enabling this body to have a fiduciary for assets that we're asked to manage. Couple of things, and I also agree with Gary that it is a tax, and as not being elected officials, it's not our position to spend tax, and I would consider revenue above and beyond what it takes to fulfill our mission and to be fiduciarily prudent with our assets that we are tasked with managing, the meters and the lots and what have you, and the decks. That net revenue should go to the city because it is tax. Couple of things, though, that I have in direct response to these points of proposal. The development piece for the lots, part of demand management would be indicating that we would raise rates on surface lots to try to push people into decks or higher in decks, as it were. We also have a goal to develop those lots. If we're tying revenue, there's going to be an assumed effort to maximize that revenue. There's going to be an assumed effort to hold harmless the city on some of that revenue, and we aren't planning on expanding the parking system. We're actually planning on contracting the parking system by building those lots into buildings, putting them on a tax roll, getting more people downtown. So one big question I would have is how do those two fit together? Where the revenue from the lots, which is, net not very significant because they're hard to manage and they're expensive to manage, but is rent, is significant gross revenue, and is projected through demand management to go up as we try to influence people's behavior on those lots. I would like to see a call out to make sure that we are not going to be hindered in our efforts to try to get those lots away from surface parking, which we've all agreed is not the highest and best use of them, given that there's kind of a conflict of tied gross revenue on the system as a whole. Same thing with the meters. The revenue from the meters is great, but it's not a lot of net revenue. We don't make a lot of money, net money from the meters. They're expensive. The ticket revenue is going down regardless of what we do. That's been shown. So a lot of the whole parking meter revenue portion, I'd look for a call out of that and how that is functioned. And finally, the idea of giving the city money for help. We didn't do that. There were proposals to do that, and at the time, through advice of legal counsel, we didn't elect to do that. We are still talking about contracts. If we want to move to grants, it's a different discussion. One that I was initially open to and would have been more in favor of than what we ultimately did because of Gary's legal concerns about mutually beneficial natures of a contract. We have to create some sort of benefit or there is no contract and there's been violations of. So those are my overall points with all of this, is that I would like to find a way to move forward. I would like to find a way to continue to give the city any net gains that we have, because I don't think it's appropriate for us to use that. But we do have a fiduciary here for assets, and I worry right now that that is being lost in that portion. So I want it to be legal, I want it to be above board, I want it to be fair, and I don't think we're there yet because we've been trying to negotiate around legal aspects of contracts.
I'm having trouble understanding, maybe it's time, maybe it's part of the larger conversation, but I'm having a lot of trouble understanding how parking is a tax, which is, I think that was part of the theory that you put out there. And I think you used Arborland as an example. Arborland went through a considerable upgrade just a few years ago, and yet, had they been in the downtown, those revenues would have been captured and would have gone back into the downtown. Had there been a TIF district in place when Briarwood was built, Briarwood's one of those city's largest taxpayers as a whole, those revenues would have been captured and put back into Briarwood. And as we look, I just don't understand how parking can be considered as a tax. And I also have a question how a merchant in the downtown area has any more of an ownership of the DDA than a citizen of the city that has decided to create a special zone in the downtown. So you and I could have perhaps a longer conversation about that, because I'm not getting those connections in the same way I think that you're putting them out there. I don't recognize parking as a tax. It is a fee that someone pays to put their automobile in place for a period of time. And but I would be happy, and again, maybe we'll do it at the retreat, but here may not be, or you and I can have lunch, and maybe we can gain a greater understanding of that principle.
Keith?
Several points. One, along those lines, I think that one of the reasons DDAs were created in the first place was because of that recognition that a strong downtown is good for the entire city. Conversely, of course, if the city's falling apart, then the downtown is obviously going to be in trouble as well. And I think that overall, we've obviously done some things right here, because we're a lot of Michigan cities in 2010 and going forward to 2011 are talking about bankruptcy and such. We're in a position where we still have a downtown that is surviving and in some ways even thriving. But obviously we're faced with a lot of challenges. My concern about this is somewhat Gary's, that if we're reopening a contract, and a lot of contracts are being asked to be reopened at this point. We're talking, the city's talking to unions and saying, we want to try and save jobs. Let's reopen the contract to find a way to do that. And this is essentially another situation like that. I've been, as I've said before, I'm one of I think the only person who's still a card-carrying union member here, and I've been in a situation on that other side where I've been asked to reopen a contract by management. And when that happens, the first thing you say is, well, show us your finances, and then you say, what's in it for us? And usually in the form of job guarantees, something along those lines. And I think we've come a long ways in terms of the development aspect. I'm not certain about, if we're talking strictly fiduciary concerns. I don't think that what we see as the parking agreement is a quid pro quo of any sort. But I've also said all along that it's been, I think, misnamed. It's not the mutually beneficial committee we should be talking about. It's the shared sacrifice committee we should be talking about. And in that respect, we have to figure out a way that's going to be truly a shared sacrifice for each. Given that, I'm concerned about some of the numbers. If this were, let's see, a lot of these things are the types of things that would be talked about when a contract was being renewed, as opposed to being reopened. So if I were to look at this agreement and say, is this a good agreement 4 years from now, when we're talking about it? Is 17.5% the right number? Are some of these other things? I look at that and I say, this is probably a pretty decent agreement. 17.5, as I play with the spreadsheet, looks perhaps on the high side, but not egregiously so. However, given that we're looking to reopen something, it seems to me they're very high numbers, especially when we look at what the DDA has as its budget over the next couple of years. As Russ has talked about, the pig and the python, and we are right in the middle of that situation right now where we're being stressed financially. At our last partnerships committee, we were looking at a $15,000 grant and saying, frankly, we don't have $15,000 until 2013 in our housing fund. And so it seems to me under those circumstances, I would like to see the something that gives us the flexibility to, when Baker Commons comes to us, when Avalon Housing comes to us, when we talk about redevelopment of some of these lots, that we have some funds available. And frankly, I think this means we have no discretionary funds for several years to come. And whether that number is 13% or 14% or whatever, I think it's something we seriously have to look at as something that would be more meaningful in terms of a shared sacrifice.
Curious, guys.
I would just, since you're right, just if anybody else who wanted to talk who hadn't spoken yet, before I give you your second chance.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I appreciate your comments, John, and I'm willing to, we're obviously going to talk about it more at the retreat, but just to be clear, if I'm buying a pair of shoes, if I need a pair of shoes, then I'm going to consider the cost and the overall cost of getting free, of going to Arbor Land and paying what they charge and getting free and easy parking, or coming down here. To that extent, the cost of parking affects the revenues that our downtown merchants are able to capture in that particular market. When you add to it the fact that we are explicitly defining or explicitly dealing with these revenues or parking fees as being a revenue generator, that in itself is a critical element of state case law that helps define the difference between a user fee and a tax. And so from that standpoint, there's already been case law that's dealt with this issue. There is a revenue generating element to it, and therefore it is dangerously close to becoming legally a tax. Now, and so just to clarify, that's where the tax notion comes in. As far as getting lunch with you, that would be a valuable quid pro quo. I've accomplished my mission, but I'll give you a call.
John.
To me, what's interesting about all this is that the two main things, the parking agreement amendments and the looking at developing parcels downtown, are two issues that I think the DDA could help to benefit the community and potentially take some pressures off the city. So I'm supportive conceptually of those things. I'm not sure that taking on those extra challenges is a great treat. I don't know that.
You want to be the bad guy?
Be careful what you're asking for. I think it's that sort of a situation. So it's hard for me to correlate that as being a mutual benefit to pay for, a benefit to actually be paying for. So that's one sort of general comment. But having said that, I think both those things are interesting. I do have a question, and maybe Roger, you're the best one to ask. With the idea of expanding the areas for parking, that parking district, what is the process for deciding where parking goes and whether it's charged for? Who does what?
Right now,
well, in this proposal, in this concept,
DDA would decide where they think additional parking meters are justified within that district, leaving out, of course, any of the residential permit areas or any areas that we might designate as potential future residential permit areas. And then the DDA would say, we want to put parking meters in these areas. That would go to, I believe, the traffic department to approve that there isn't any interference with traffic patterns in those, wherever we're designating, and then we'd go ahead and put them in.
And within that, a related question.
Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the process.
It would be the city transportation engineers would need to issue a traffic control order, a TCO, to ensure that they feel confident that traffic is not impeded.
And within that area, is that exclusively on-street parking, or are there public parcels within that area that would also come into play?
To my knowledge, we are talking about strictly on-street parking.
Okay.
I'm sure there are city-owned parcels that don't currently have parking on it within that district, but I don't think there's any intention that we would be managing we would be putting parking on those, or that we would be managing that.
I'm just thinking mainly of areas that there might be potential for development in the future where the landscape could change fairly quickly.
Yeah.
You know, I think-
And remember that parcels would have to be zoned for parking as well.
Of course, right. But one quick last comment is that, these two initiatives, to me, make a lot of sense, but I'm not sure they make sense in the context of renegotiating a contract. I mean, I'm still disturbed and concerned by this notion of how this contract is a quid pro quo of connecting the two. It just doesn't, to me, I don't know that it benefits anyone in the community to kind of view it as sort of a deal in a way being made. I mean, to me, these are all somewhat separate initiatives, and they may each unto themselves be valid and beneficial, but I'm not sure that tying them all together does a whole lot for anyone, in my mind.
Russ?
I also think that we need to clarify that this parking area that's being proposed, there isn't a lot of street parking that could be added.
Not a lot.
So-
There are certainly a few areas that are all currently used as street parking for commuters or users of the facilities that don't have meters in them.
So the notion that the area is being defined so that additional street parking can be added is the wrong implication.
That's a good point. Right. Good.
That it's not that a meter here or a meter there or 3 or 4 meters might be added because it would be considered beneficial to the folks involved. But the point is not to define an area and then put street meters throughout that area. It's really just to define an area where there's parking that's already taking place and just to create clarity over who manages that space. That's the primary purpose of it. And I think that it's your point about, what does development have to do with parking in a sense is valid. And I think that that's also just one of those kind of political dynamics. We're in a political arena and there's discussions that are going on. Downtown development is interesting, very interesting for the Downtown Development Authority because it's in our name. It's something that that we think that we can help the city with. So I think it's more of a practical linkage as opposed to a logical linkage in a political sense. And the third point is that Roger Hewitt, on behalf of the Mutually Beneficial Committee, has put in a tremendous amount of work on behalf of the DDA and trying to come up in lots of different ways to figure out how we can make forward progress on this matter. And it's a very complicated matter, and as Gary has articulated, there's a contract aspect of it, which is just a legal document that creates clarity in terms of one's relationship with various things. And then there's a political dynamic, which is there, and causes things like development aspects to be brought in, which again is it makes sense from the mutual interest of the two entities, but maybe not a terrific about a logical sense in that way. And Keith's point about this being a shared sacrifice probably is a shared sacrifice committee is probably a better practical articulation of what it is that's being accomplished. And I look forward to the work that Roger has done being reconciled with staff recommendations about this at our January meeting so that we can get some very clear and very confident direction in terms of how we should address this situation in a final way with the city as we're coming up to the deadlines and the city budget process because I'd hate to see the very good work that's been put into it just continue to be talked around. And I look forward to the stake being put in the ground in a clear way from the DDA's point of view, so that there is a clear negotiating point on behalf of the DDA with the city.
Thank you. Well, I think this has been a good framework for our discussion in January, because I think we've probably lopped off about 15 or 20 minutes of our January extended retreat just by having all these ideas, which I notice Susan has been diligently taking down, and this will give us a great beginning to our discussion then. Was there a couple of other remarks? Yeah.
Just a couple things, since I'm the new kid on the block on this issue, and many of you have been through the history, and as a recovering lawyer, Gary, I understand the legal part of this, but having come when I've come, it's not as much of a problem for me, and I have tremendous respect for the partners here and the work that's been done, but the city and what the city of Ann Arbor has done to make this community what it is, and that includes the downtown, and the DDA's great work in terms of taking over parking and really strategically moving downtown. I understand my role as a DDA board member is a fiduciary one. So it seems to me, though, there's a couple things for me. What really is a fair rent? And I'm not sure that anyone can really say what that is. And so we're working off some figures, Roger, and I appreciate those, and we can plug them into the budget. But for me, moving forward, it would be about long-term certainty, so the city can plan on what's going to happen, and the DDA, Keith, can know that we're not going to have certain dollars. That is going to affect our budget if that's what we agree to. So for me, it's about how can we ensure some long-term stability here and understand the consequences to that.
A few points I was taken with what Keith had to say, and just add something to that about when DDAs were formed. I think it wasn't just a recognition of saving downtowns, which is incredibly important, but also giving cities a little bit more of an advantage in the region because of the ability of growth in the townships to just spread out over the countryside. It gave the cities a way to compensate for that in some way, to concentrate resources in a certain area. And the second was, these are extraordinary times, and I don't want us to lose sight of that. And also, something we shouldn't lose sight of is I've had continuing conversations with the chief of police and the deputy chief, and the parking enforcement people are perfectly willing, it seems, to go back to look at one of the original possibilities, which was to be more of an eyes and ears and ambassador to the city. You know, they are out there on the streets, and they're willing, and everyone seems willing to retrain them. And they would almost look forward to having a little bit of a different role, a value added to what they do now. And so we shouldn't lose sight that that could be done, and they could accomplish these. One of the difficult things when we have a case of aggressive panhandling, for instance, the citizen who was perhaps aggressively panhandled is very reluctant to show up in court. When the officer who may have taken a report, you know, how they track that down. But the parking enforcement people make a perfect witness if they are aware of this in the downtown area. The last perhaps point I would make is, and it steps aside from the parking issues that we're talking about in the contract, is that I don't think we should be quite as glum as perhaps some are about the DDA budget, because it is not a static thing. About $1 million has been added on the TIF side in just the last several years. And if you look at the future, Zaragoza 2 is under construction, and it's $178,000 is the estimate that would come back to the DDA on the TIF side. We have every indication that 601 South Forest is moving forward. They've moved the tenants out. They've applied for the demolition permits. That's another $260,000 coming in to the DDA in the near future. If those two both reach completion, and I suspect certainly we can be more sure of Zaragoza 2, 601 Forest is actually taking all the steps that you would expect them to take to move forward. So it's not a static thing, certainly on the TIF side. So while we see growth in revenues in the DDA, that's a much more difficult proposition on the city side. We, in just last tax year, lost the 4.86% of our property tax revenue with Pfizer's leaving. So there, again, it's extraordinary times, and the DDA has some advantages that the city does not, and I would hope that we would all just keep that balance in mind as we move forward. And I think the progress to date has been spectacular. And again, I would echo what's been said. Roger's been doing a great deal of work on this, as have the other committee members on both sides of this.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that and what Russ said, that I can get pretty passionate about this and lose myself, but lest it be unsaid or be missed, I always trusted and respected the integrity of everybody in this process, that everybody is working for the best, what they believe to be, whether I agree with them or not, what they believe to be the best interest of the community. And I think the work that Roger has done, even though I don't agree with the position, I think it's still a tremendous benefit to our community and our DDA. So I would certainly thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Now with the other 3/4 of our meeting, can I have someone move approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Subcommittee reports. John Mowat, Transportation Committee first.
Right, I'll try to move through this as quickly as we can. You'll see that you have a proposed resolution on page 11 in the board packet. Regards the Ypsi Ann Arbor transportation enhancements that we've talked about. And keep in mind that the notion, I think Ray spoke earlier about the idea of enhancing alternative transportation. And this is a good example of some first steps in that regard. The focus of this is the notion of trying to facilitate mainly commuters and folks in the mornings and afternoons being able to get from Ypsi to Ann Arbor and back again. And the proposal that you see here focuses on a combination of improving what's known as Route 4, the service that's AATA runs between the two communities, and also the notion of, on the Ypsilanti end of that, collecting people to be able to use that service to be brought here into downtown. I think an important thing is to understand the existing route right now currently runs at 15-minute frequencies and is about 45 minutes. And that route runs via U of M Hospital and then downtown. What is being proposed would increase those frequencies to 10 minutes and 38-minute total trip. However, part of it is also to have some of the buses runs come downtown first, so that people time their bus correctly, they can get here all the faster. So those are a couple of aspects of that Route 4 piece. And you'll see in the information that work has been done to establish what the cost of that service would be, and then to look to prorate what the downtown users portion of it is. As you can imagine, a lot of people are using it to go to U of M Hospital or other locations. So what this resolution is for is really to put forward a challenge grant, if you will, for a fairly modest amount of money on our part, which amounts to $14,417, which, by the way, is not money being added from the budget. It turns out that there is Get Downtown money that had been allocated in our budget for a survey, which has already been accounted for in their budget. So we're able to basically divert funds from one pot to another to be able to cover these expenses.
So we're redirecting already budgeted funds.
Correct.
It won't change the bottom line of the budget.
Correct. So with that brief overview, I'd like to put forward this resolution for consideration.
I would like to support it. And then I think because we are redirecting, I think that has to be part of our resolution. So I would like to propose a friendly amendment, resolve that this money be from the already budgeted Get Downtown fund. And that clarifies that we're not spending any more money.
Is that a friendly amendment? Any seconder, so it's friendly to you.
It's friendly to me.
Any discussion? John?
Just something I've talked about before. and something for the committee to keep in mind. And as we look to the future, if we can get the state to come up with the matching funds for the federal award of high-speed rail money, which also makes commuter rail work. And if you look at the House bill that's been passed, it includes money for the Wally rail line as well. I don't know that will go forward. I can see the Senate then paring that back down to just what's needed for the match for the high-speed rail money. But that goes 90% of the way to making the commuter rail that we've been working on with other communities, Dearborn and communities along the way, in Ypsilanti, a possibility, and perhaps a very real one. And there's fully the intention, if the state comes up with the matching funds, which everyone is very hopeful that they will do, MDOT would own the line. That would come through here, and everything, the whole game changes as to how commuter rail works on the rail line. It's a 10-minute rail ride from downtown Ypsilanti to Ann Arbor. And the redirection might be for buses now to meet people as they come in on the train and take them to downtown Ann Arbor. So they just throw that out there. The conversations are moving forward. In fact, we were in the middle of scheduling another meeting with our regional partners to keep this moving forward. There's no reason to believe that it wouldn't happen given the fortitude that we've had in pursuing this and how fortunate we've been in having this award come to the state of Michigan. So there's certainly some things we have to be a little guarded about, but I appreciate this work, but it could be a game changer, as that term's come up before today, as far as how do people get to Ann Arbor, because the bus is never going to be able to compete with that rail line once it's up and running. But until then, we do need some solutions.
I think along those lines, too, is that this is within the context, too, of AATA looking at their master plan for the next 30 years, and this is an incremental step, and AATA has been great about making the time to analyze a bunch of options for us while they're in the midst of doing this other work. So, this is a look at a first step that can be enhanced and be further part of that master plan, including leading to the idea of commuter rail service. So I think in terms of what we're all looking to do is enhancing downtown and ways for people to get here and back. This is certainly a great first step, and I just want to really reinforce strongly that there's been a great working relationship with the ATA, which I think is very beneficial to all of us long term.
Yeah, and I want to thank Amber too, because
absolutely, Amber's done a great job.
The calculation of all of this would never have been possible without Amber's very excellent calculations and figuring and knowledge about how this should all be parsed out. So thank you.
And indeed, the difference with this, of course, is rubber on cement can change much quicker. It could happen as soon as the second quarter, I believe, in 2011. Wasn't the springtime? Wasn't the springtime?
When can they make this change by? What's the latest we've heard on that?
Well, Chris had mentioned initially the goal would be May.
Is it May?
Right.
But Susan, did you have a?
No, I think that's probably the earliest
Right.
it could change.
Right.
Okay.
So in any case, much sooner. The other thing I wanted to just emphasize was we did decide make this a challenge grant because we're the first money in to try and get some of the other partners to say we can put money in as well.
And a big part of that challenge, by the way, is on the IPSI end. As you can imagine, one of the big concerns is how do you collect people from disparate areas? And that's one aspect we'll talk about in a few minutes about Night Ride.
Great first step, but man, is it a baby one. So I hope that, assuming this passes, we help AATA as much as we can with these challenges, because it's going to be hard as they go to these pots of money to get this. Hopefully it's a first step that as more progresses, there's an open door that they can come back. I'm having visions of the next 4 years of a lot of resolutions at 14,000, but I have to imagine more staff time was spent of $14,000 putting this together than what we're offering here. So I just want to keep that in mind. There is money still in our budget that hasn't been allocated. That is always burning a hole in my pocket. So as we look forward, great first step, but I hope it's not the last one. I hope we don't just say, okay, IPSI solved.
Yeah. Just so everyone knows too, that Chris White came up with a whole menu of possibilities and options, and they're still there, they're still out there, and this is really sort of the low-hanging fruit of when you look at it from a cost per rider point of view and being a low-cost first step. But you're right, there's a menu of things that we can still entertain looking at as we look to measure how successful this is.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Passed. Resolution passed.
The next thing I want to talk about briefly that has some correlation to this is changes to night ride. And, again, it's that notion of those folks who work downtown after bus service ends, how do they get home? And so Amber's, again, boy, Amber, you're getting a lot of kudos today. But she's done a good job of looking at how that program works now and found some things that may be inefficient about it and so forth, and how get downtown cards are being used and so forth. So one aspect of that we've had conversations about is looking at changing the cost for using Night Ride for folks that have a card from $1 to $2, increase that so they aren't abused as much and its income stream, but also to look at expanding its geographical territory from Carpenter to Gulfside.
That was what was initially recommended.
It's again a way to try for those folks who live on the east side of Ann Arbor, west side of Ipsy, to try to expand that area. And if you can imagine that area from Carpenter to Gulfside, when you consider walking distance, if somebody can just get as far as Gulfside, they can still get that captures a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of potential people. So, what we're looking at is just trying to coordinate these efforts of giving people options and choices. And I remind folks that this too should be thought of hand in hand as we look at potential for charging for parking at night downtown, those sorts of things. Where do people park? We've got to look at what other opportunities we can provide to people. So that's another piece of something that is being looked at. And Amber, I think, has a good plan for how to do it incrementally so we understand how successful the Night Ride program is.
I have a question. If you're going to expand it to Gulfside, that's between Carpenter and Gulfside is Pittsfield Township. Has anyone talked to them about maybe helping with this? Because they do provide bus service.
Amber, maybe you could.
Yeah, please step up to the microphone.
Chris actually has been talking to Pittsfield for both the daytime Ann Arbor FC and the night ride Ann Arbor FC, and they are interested. And the university is actually quite interested in participating in night ride as well.
Thank you.
It's always nice for our vast television audience to get to see Amber Miller, we speak of often.
So if there aren't any other questions, I've got a couple of quick updates. The connector study, there were a couple of presentations done for the latest in the connector study. Roger, Susan, a number of people were at the library for that one, and I think that it's simply verifying that there's a lot of need, especially between Central and North Campus, and there's certainly potential for all. It's much of what I think you've heard before, that there are lots of possibilities of ways to provide that service that are still going to be studied. And I think in the short of it is that that's continuing to move forward. And I think probably the most important thing is the university's continuing what I perceive as a commitment to it, and probably a need to do it. Blake Transit Center, the latest step in that, I believe, is that there's been outreach to Greyhound and U of M to look at the idea of being a little bit more of an intermodal station where you have not only ATA, but Greyhound, Indian Trails, the U of M bus system, which obviously would have a lot of benefits and connections. I had a chance to talk to Robert Jordan at Greyhound, and who I've worked with before, and he seems quite excited by that prospect. So I think that ultimately it could mean something to both what we're looking at for along Fourth and potentially to the ground level of the structure of whether there's good use for space on our side of the street for these functions, and that's going to be kind of an ongoing part of the study. So again, another good example of good cooperation with AETA. Susan's staying in close touch with them in those conversations. A couple of other things, the city bike Sharo installations that everyone has seen. It's I guess my understanding is that what feedback we've been getting here has been by and large positive. Be interesting as we go back to looking at bicycle issues. I'd be interested, I'm sure folks here would be interested if anything people hear from people using it downtown. If you're having safety problems, upside and downside, I think it would be good to try to reach out and try to get good feedback about how well it works downtown, because that might be a little bit of a different animal than, sort of on the outskirts of downtown. And the last thing is the B-Cycle presentation was yesterday. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here for it, but I don't know if...
Yeah, I was here for most of it, and there were quite a few interested people to look at it. This is a shared bicycle program similar to what people have encountered in Europe and Paris and Berlin and various places. And they would say, the B-Cycle people would say theirs is vastly improved from some of those, and it's quite nice. So probably within our committee we'll be discussing some of the particulars that were shown yesterday.
Thanks. Anyone have any questions for me?
So our next committee meeting is next week.
Oh my God. All right. Yep. December 8th at 11 a.m. Oh, that's right. New date and time. December 8th, 11 a.m.
Write that down.
Yes.
Thank you, John. Partnerships. Sandy and Russ, have you tossed to see who's going to report?
Yes, and I'd like to start off by saying that neither Amber Miller nor Roger Hewitt made any particularly large contributions to the partnership committee work this month.
However, David Conville did.
Yeah.
I was going to say you're all on your own, but no.
But no. We closed the third year of the energy audits yesterday. I don't know how many we got, but I assume we had a few. We have to date have done 73 completed audits. 24 buildings or businesses have installed energy-saving improvements, with the total of the grants that we've put out at $145,000. And the payback has been approximately 2.6 years. You can see the report on page 14 and 15 of the 2 years that we have data for, and how it's broken into. Just a reminder, there's a phase 1, which is the audit period, and then the phase 2, where the buildings have an opportunity to meet with the auditors and decide where the low-hanging fruit are, which is, as we've defined, is anything less than 8 years for payback period. So I think this continues to be successful. We have $200,000 for this next cycle, $100,000 for the grants, and $100,000 for installations. And we can carry them forward. For the last years, we've talked about if we are not completing spending on the first or second year phase, we can keep going forward as long as it's addressing these financial or the energy contributions.
Yes, and the Shelter Association of Washtenaw County, who we recently gave a nice grant to, had a part 2 of that grant, and that part 2 was for solar photovoltaic array and computers, totaling about $110,000, a little more than that. And at this time, we resolved not to recommend the approval of that grant. The payback period for the solar panels was 29 or 19 years, depending on how you calculated DTE rebates. to the shelter and things like that. So anyway, at this time we passed on that particular grant request. The Ann Arbor Housing Commission came to request $500,000 or part of that for Baker Commons, we didn't recommend that we fund that at this time because we have lots of other commitments in terms of the housing fund at this time, so we're just unclear about what the funds are at this particular point in time in terms to grant a proposal of this magnitude. The Housing Commission is owned by the city, these repairs are the responsibility of the city, and we're in the middle of these mutually beneficial or shared sacrifice kind of discussions, and this seems to be something that wouldn't be illogical, or maybe it is in a political sense, to put in the hopper as we discuss all of these matters that involve the DDA and the city.
We also had a request from Exceed Energy, and this did have to do with the Michigan Theater. So during that portion of the meeting, we asked Russ to go and walk around the block, which he did. We're not going to ask him to do that now. We had quite a lot of dialogue about this. This is Exceed is part of the nonprofit program of the Clean Energy Coalition, and they requested to put installations at the Michigan Theater. One is for the energy-saving lamp replacements, and the other is for a solar demonstration project. And we just didn't feel, yet again, that we were in a position to make this sort of a grant for a couple of reasons. And one is because it is so similar to what we're doing with the Energy Conservation Grant Program, that we really felt that everybody else has gone through the audit process. It didn't seem right to have Michigan Theater kind of, even though we could see that this was very low-hanging fruit, they need to go through the process of having the audit as well. They have agreed, and the theater is going to go through the audit process and then go through the regular channels through the grant program and see whether it still fits within the guidelines we've established. Now you can come back in the room.
Yes, thank you. Tony Darrenzinski, who's a member of City Council and a member of the Planning Committee, was at our meeting. We have representatives at that meeting from other places around the city, including the Planning Commission. And he let us know that Ann Arbor, Pittsfield Township, Ypsilanti Township, and Ypsilanti are all working together on a collaborative plan regarding the improvements of Washtenaw Avenue, particularly between where Washtenaw Avenue leaves the downtown of Ann Arbor and heads into Ypsilanti. And they have created a Corridor Improvement Authority, a CIA, sounds rather sinister, which is very similar to a DDA in terms of having an incremental tax fund capture agency that's part of their plan. So anyway, not really a downtown element per se, but nice for us to know, and nice to know that they're considering another tax capture authority to improve an area of our city. Not in the downtown, but an important part of our whole city infrastructure. And we have a meeting a week from today at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, December 8th. All the DDA board members are invited, as is the community, as is the nature of these public meetings, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody there, where we'll have some very special holiday punch prepared by Susan Polley. She doesn't know this yet, but it's what I'm thinking we need.
I think so.
Thank you, Russ.
Big bag of popcorn.
Might
Maybe a
have
big bag of popcorn.
about 65 people at your next meeting. We'll see. Next is what we're now calling our Bricks and Money Committee. In our new kind of merged committee phase here, we have the two-headed monster of,
Accurate description.
yes, Roger and John.
So who's brick and who's money?
I'm Rick.
I think I know the answer to
Yeah,
that.
he's brick, he's money, and I think they've got that all settled. There was no fist fight that occurred in any of this decision making.
How about calling it bricks and bucks?
We'll take that on the
Yeah.
priority list.
All right.
Does that
Yeah.
require a resolution? I think it does.
It might, I don't know.
By
It
law
might,
change.
might be the B&B committee. So, and that goes along with that whole holiday punch item.
It's better for deciding names.
So, Roger, are you going to start?
Yeah, I don't know if we've actually had a committee meeting yet, have we?
No, we've got
we're-
the committees on here, and some of them don't even, haven't even met yet, but
Committees, but we'll go through.
we're forward thinking.
We'll go through the money or bucks part of it. If you turn, I think, to the last page, 16, the parking report for October. Very briefly, overall revenues were up about 4.6%, which is understandable since we had a rate increase since the previous year, a scheduled rate increase, which started in September. Mitigating that, that the increase is strictly due to the rate increase, we did have one fewer business day than the same October of 2009, and our overall number of parking spaces has declined by about 1%, primarily due to construction. Hourly patrons, which of course fluctuate quite a bit, is down about 4.6%, but overall, despite the economy, the parking usage seems to be fairly constant. We're not seeing anything that we would describe as a drop in usage at all. And as a user of the system, I know that Maynard is filling up again during the weekdays.
Yeah.
So, I'll be glad to answer, Joe and I will be glad to answer any questions. Again, about that. I'll again try to be very brief here, given that I wasn't very brief in the mutually beneficial discussion. Basically, other things to report. Our auditors reported back, and we had a clean bill of health from the auditors. There were a few technical issues that we've taken care of, but overall, everything is approved by the auditors, and nothing that we haven't been able to address very quickly. We also got an RFP back on from our financial institutions, looking at both the placement of our regular bank accounts and our investment accounts. Staff reviewed those, and their recommendation was, at least for the time being, to stay with Bank of Ann Arbor for both of those services. Although the committee did decide that after we get through the construction and the Fifth Avenue underground structure, which is causing a lot of money to be moved between various accounts to pay for that. After we're past that, we may want to reopen and look at whether we should split some of our money between two different institutions, strictly as a safety issue of stability of the banks. But for at least the next 3 years, we're recommending we stay with Bank of Ann Arbor. And last, this is something that happened a little while ago, and I was remiss in not bringing up earlier. I wanted to commend Mark Lyons and his staff at Republic Parking on their own initiative. They did an exhaustive analysis of parking revenue versus hours of operation and labor costs. And I think it was, if I'm correct in the name, that Meekin Kiefer did a lot of analysis of the cost benefit of hours for staying open versus revenue we're collecting, and how much labor that was costing us. And they have gone and adjusted the hours and a number of the structures and surface lots to try to minimize our costs while maximizing our revenue. And although we don't know what the ultimate savings would be, we're certainly anticipating it being in excess of $100,000 a year of savings. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. We were estimating it, but
Approximately
140,000. This is, and again, this is not required under their contract. This is an initiative that they took as our operators to try to save us money. So really want to thank Mark and Megan and his whole staff for the effort they put in on that. In a time when budgets are tight, it's greatly appreciated.
So what does that mean in terms of change of hours? Can you give us a
Basically, there are times when the gates will be up and there won't be an attendant and it won't be collecting. These are usually in the early morning or late in the evening, particularly in the morning when people are coming out, that it's costing Republic more to put an attendant in there than they're collecting in revenue. And that's what they're looking at. Where are there times when people are just sitting there and we're not bringing any money in? But it was a very exhaustive analysis.
It'll vary from structure to structure.
Oh yes, and yeah.
Okay.
I had a question about the banks if we're done with this.
Sure.
So, and that is just, other than the prudent measure of storing our eggs in more than one basket, was there any other reason for even visiting the issue of changing banks, or is it a service issue or any problems? Or
No, we were actually quite satisfied. It was a request from a board member that we look at it.
Okay.
And we've been, staff has been very happy with Bank of Ann Arbor. But we felt it was prudent to at least take a look and see what was out there, whether there was any significant cost savings. And there wasn't any significant cost savings. Should also mention that Bank of Ann Arbor counts all the change the Republic Parking brings in from the parking meters in-house and gives us very quick results on that, which nobody else was really able to do. We also have to send it out of town to do the counting. And it's a lot of coins.
And that costs money too.
You should see the calluses on Tim Marshall's finger.
I think they use machines.
John?
Okay.
Thank you.
Bricks time?
Bricks time.
I'll just go through my bullet points, my checklist. On the South Fifth Avenue Underground Garage, I'm sure all of you have seen the tower crane. The tower crane is up and started moving materials on December 15th. That's going to make everything move much more efficiently, and it's good to finally have that up. The second deck pour is scheduled in 2 weeks at the east leg, the dog leg of the garage. Of course, the first floor was poured. Second floor is ready to be poured. Mass concrete foundation pours continue. 2 mass pours have occurred this month with approximately 600 cubic yards of concrete each. A pour of approximately 1,000 cubic yards is scheduled for next week, with another 2,000 cubic yards the following week. So a lot of the very large concrete pours that are in the water table will be occurring soon. And once those are done, again, the project becomes, at least in my eyes, somewhat simplified. Mass excavation is 98% completed, with approximately 245,000 cubic yards removed so far. Adrian made the comment that they're almost getting to the point that they're going to have to start bringing it up in buckets on ropes because the site's getting very, very tight. But they have almost everything removed at this point. And the last is dewatering continues along Phase 2 area, and that seems to be going well. On the 5th and Division project, the southeast corner of 5th and Ann remain to be completed. Light poles on Division have been put in service, and the light poles on 5th and Avenue are being wired as we speak, and DTE will then connect them, and they will be working. The project has been winterized so that some of the areas where brick is going to go next season have just been filled in with mulch to prevent a trip hazard, and that brick work will be completed next year because this Friday all the work on 5th and Division will be stopped for the winter. Does anybody have any questions? Our next Bricks and Money Committee meeting is Wednesday, December 15th at 11 a.m. And that's 1 week earlier than usual because of the holiday.
Thank you. Well, next we're going to have a report because it's a committee that hasn't met yet, our Economic Development and Communication Committee. We are going to be creating our goals and our work plan and figuring out kind of the governance of the committee. And so everyone is welcome, whoever wants to be on that committee. That meeting will be December 15th at 9 a.m. And that's also 1 week earlier than it would usually be because we're accommodating for holiday schedules.
So it'll normally be the fourth Wednesday in the month, but except for
For
this
the last,
particular-
yeah.
The last or the fourth?
Do we do it?
It's the last, which is
last.
usually the- yeah, which
Yeah.
is usually the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah. Are there other DDA business matters?
Well, I just want to say on that, I believe our intent with this is going to be a committee where we involved, much like partnerships, members of the community. So if people in the press are looking for something to write, maybe put it out there that we will be, looking for lots of public feedback and interaction with that committee in particular. So hopefully that's the one where we get to be the good guys and more people can feel that they have input.
Yes.
Well, we're always good guys.
We're
It's just-
always good guys.
whether or not people can feel that they have some more direct input in what we do here. So
Yeah, I mean, and I think particularly that is the committee where we will look for expertise within our community, which we have plenty of, and we just need to be able to corral it and get it in our favor. So that's
And Amber Miller
a
may
good
be
point.
at that meeting.
She may be there. That is an attraction that people can come for. Is there anyone who wants to address us from the audience for 4 minutes? Don't see anyone. We had no audience
I
comment
want Dave
today.
to give us holiday best wishes.
Move we adjourn.
Yes, okay. All in favor of adjournment? We are adjourned. That's good.
Hey, General Lawrence.
I've never seen it take so long to get to approval of the minutes.
I know.
You had all the news today. I know you talked to you.
Okay.
How you doing? Good. Can I get a copy of that report?
You can. I believe that. Thanks for the heads up. I believe that Susan probably has it. Yeah, okay.
I should email both you guys.
Yeah, I have exactly the summary here.